All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Unlocked podcast. We are three business owners, global business owners, or North American, however you want to categorize it, that are discussing our experiences around growing and scaling locksmith and security businesses. And we have come together for the past 34 episodes. This makes number 35.
Mm-hmm.
See,
Good fix.
Yep. And we have been sharing some of the lessons that we've learned, the challenges that we've had, and the successes that we've had through the process, so that potentially you can skip along the way and not have to have as many of those mistakes.
Screw up as much as us.
Yeah, so it works. So that's kind of the concept of the podcast. We have a website. It's called unlockedpodcast.com. You can check that out and you can follow and subscribe. We have a new blog post that correspond with the episodes. And we definitely invite you to reach out if something caught your attention, or maybe something that you would like us to discuss at more length. Please let us know, because we definitely want to make sure that we're providing.
Or if you disagree.
Oh yeah, sure. If you think that Tony is
these
wrong,
two guys, these two guys say a lot of dumb things, so I'm sure there's people that disagree with you guys. So maybe comment.
I can't imagine there's anyone that'd disagree with your pretty mild opinions.
No, well, it's hard being right all this time.
So on that note, today is going to be, well, first of all, I guess introductions. I'm Chad Lingefeld from Charlotte, North Carolina, our little company, Loc-Doc Security. And in the middle, we've got a guy from Canada.
See, I'm on the left on our screen. But I guess on a podcast,
a risky move.
Doesn't really matter.
I guess.
Yeah, that's true. So the voice on the left, Lars Johnson from Calgary, Alberta. Our group is Calgary Lock Safe, Edmonton Lock Safe, Lock Safe Group of Canada. Take your pick. We're the good guys.
And I am Tony from Minneapolis, Minnesota, with Assured Security. Yeah.
Oh boy,
wow, that one really.
Interesting. So on the topic of Alberta, my wife and I, Greta, we watch Top Chef every week, and it's a great show. And they've been visiting Canada this whole season. They've been doing Canada stuff.
Canada. Yeah.
No, well, this isn't Top Chef Canada. They just went to Canada.
Go ahead.
Top Chef America decided to visit our great northern state. So,
right.
In the last couple episodes, they've been in Alberta. So I've been texting Lars, "Hey, have you been to this place? Have you been to this place?" And giving me a little glimpse into what Alberta is like, since Lars has never invited us out there.
I thought you were going to mention that it was the Stanley Cup Game 1 was yesterday, and my Oilers won the first game. That was going to come up, but
had no idea. Nope.
Oh, yeah. Well, hockey's this not game in my feed on ice, and you have this.
Chad learned about that recently.
Yeah. Oh, mama!
All right. Yeah. So, Chad, what are we talking about today?
Well, there was something else that I was going to discuss, and now I forgot about it as you start. Speaking of Calgary, yesterday my wife had a get together at the house with some ladies that she had met, and one of them was from Calgary. And so they asked, "Do you know Lars?" Because, it's figured that everybody knows everybody.
And she said yes. Tell me she said yes. Oh, yeah. Nice guy.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Oh, yeah. Great. Yep.
Totally. Guy, eh? All right. Totally. Okay. So today, I think the episode's going to be a little different, because I would like to try to use this platform as a brainstorming session. And so I want to give you a little bit of context of where my brain has been for the last several months. And I have talked to some of the folks in our organization about this. I've talked to my business coach about this. And so I want to kind of get your guys' feedback.
You've wisely come to us.
Very real business coaches
and thoughts on it to see, one, if you're thinking about this as well, and if so, what are you doing about it, or what could be done? So here's kind of the high level concept. Mm-hmm. I look at my career. I've been in the industry for 21 years. I have just yesterday we celebrated the 13th work anniversary for one of my top leaders in our organization, Sam Gray. He's handles our purchasing
musician.
He's also a musician. Yeah, but
we also got to get that jingle back, by the way. God, come on, Chad. Sorry.
We're slack on our production. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sam celebrated 13 years with us. My operations manager, Zach, has been with us for 12 years. And Nathan, our Charlotte branch manager, is I think 12 or 11. So it just kind of for context, 21 years in the business for me. And then kind of some of my top tier leadership that are handling a lot of the major decisions on a daily basis have been with me for at least 10 plus years. So half of that time we've been working together. My question is, a lot of the functionality that we have as an organization in those conversations are based off of the fact that we've been working together for 10 plus years. There's a lot of familiarity. We can move at a very fast pace because I understand the way that they see things. They understand the way I see things. We have our own common conversation, whatever. Well, if that is the tiered effect every 10 years, are they already mentoring and creating kind of the pipeline of leadership to step into their role or to replace their role?
Right. Like who's next?
Who's next? Yep.
Right.
Because at some point, somebody's got to step into some of the things that I'm doing, and that entire ladder change happens. And the reason all this is relevant is, one, are we being proactive about it? And so the conversation I had in this, hopefully I'm trying to summarize this. The conversation that I had with a couple of these guys the other day was, we've done it really informal and very unstructured for the past 10 years. And it's worked because we figured it out. That, I believe, has a limited scale factor. Where
Absolutely.
It probably
every 10 years, that's probably not quick enough.
Well, the time frame, one, but two, it wasn't like we set out and said, this is the strategy.
Osmosis. Right.
Correct. It's just been osmosis. And so how can we formalize a leadership pipeline? Not necessarily to say that every person that we're talking to is going to fall into some type of a management role, but what are the things, the skills, the soft and hard skills that we're looking for? How do we identify those in people? And then how do we bring those up to a certain level over the next period of several years?
Right.
So that because I feel like, if it's 20 years for me on this career, 10 years for the next iteration, are we looking at 5 years for the next iteration? Like at a point, how is that? Is it 7 years? Like, what's the trim down effect on time frame for us to be able to have those people in pipeline? And especially as the organization is growing, instead of it being 3, we may need 5. Right. So that's kind of the theory that I've been thinking through, and I don't have the answers, so that's why it's more of a brainstorming.
So you've come to the fountain of knowledge here. Drink from me.
I really like this topic. I've had this.
Well, there you go, Chad.
Yeah,
good job.
Well done, Chad. Well done, Chad. Let's see if we discuss anything important. But I like the idea and the premise. So it's interesting because I've had a handful of different growth conversations with our leadership team, and every time it comes back to like, what's stopping us from doing that? Like, oh, let's go expand to this area. Okay, what's stopping us? We don't have the person. Okay, let's go grow and do this. Okay, what's stopping us? Well, we don't have the person. And every time it comes back to not just the person, but the management and the management team. Like, that is a huge bottleneck. That is what's stopping us from growing further. And interestingly, this topic also came up in another peer group of mine, a company similar size to ours, said the same exact thing. Like, you hit that level of I think it happened a while back, going from 17 employees to 25 employees, you need that level of management.
And then
going again from 50 to 70, you need a second level of management, which is a whole different skill set. And I've had this thought of, we need to solve this problem, but naturally haven't done anything to solve it. So,
well, in Lars, I'm interested to hear what your perspective, because the reason all of this matters is, how do you intentionally create that repeatable leadership methodology? Because if there's some intentional efforts or some intentional activities that you do as a leader to create a culture, how is that going to be carried on? Because that's really the question. Because I think you could probably hire somebody to come in and do some of the management tasks. Are they going to be making decisions in alignment with the company culture is really the big question.
Yeah. I was going to say, knowing this was coming up, actually, I had a conversation with Matt yesterday, and Matt's, the leader of our company. He was the general manager of our company for, 5 or 6 years, and is now the operating officer of all the companies. But, I was having the conversation with him, and I touched on, the why this matters part in my mind. Because, I'm 13 years into this, and anyone that knows me is I don't hesitate to delegate. I'm an ideas person. I'll throw it on the wall. Say, this is what we got to get to. Here's how we can break it down. Let me know how it goes. Right. Effective or not, I'm not going to comment on. However, but what it's done is it's really allowed me, like, what does my calendar look like? What's the flexibility? Well, it's really anything. I don't really have any set commitments. And I know, Chad, you're going to be similar to that. But why this matters, if you have a partner, is, I talked to Matt yesterday. I was like, whether it's this week or next month or a year from now or 5 years from now, you're going to start to feel resentment. If you're in the quarry, like swinging the pickaxe every day, and I'm out playing golf, I come back to the office and I'm all tanned, and, you're sitting there killing yourself with stress. Well, at least the bottom half, relative, half of my face
more
is
red.
The top half isn't. Minor detail, but that was the conversation with him. Is if you want to reference a book, the Simon Sinek, we're talking Infinite Game. We're talking, are you building a business that has a shelf life? You retire and the business dies, or you sell it, or whatever. Or are you building a company that runs independent of the founders? And that's really my intention. Yeah. So this was a good topic that, because I think we're all somewhat in that kind of messy middle type of area, which is another book reference. But, just building that culture of identifying leaders. And that's probably the first thing I would ask is, throw it out there, is how do you identify these people? Yeah. It's just because it's a tough one.
Yeah. So even going a little bit deeper on the kind of culture side. So I had to and there's a book out there that this guy had written around culture, and the real basic summary is what?
There was this book that this guy wrote about this topic.
Really descriptive there. I'm sure there's plenty of those types of books.
Let me just Google that real quick. This guy wrote this book.
I know you don't like to name drop, but
no, this one is not because I don't want to name drop. It's because I really don't remember the name. I think it's something about
probably me
being a jerk.
Probably got this from me.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you wrote a book on culture.
Jerks at work?
Ooh, that would be a good read.
The no jerk rule.
Anyway, I had talked to this guy about it, and it really summarized down to a culture is a centralized set of behaviors, beliefs, and values. And why I really think that that's important. And that's when I look back at the past 10, 12 years, as I've been working with this team, and we've learned to trust each other, we have similar behaviors, similar beliefs, similar values,
similar beards
as a fact, right? And when that happens, I can instill a high level of trust in them, because I can really believe that they're going to make a similar decision that I would, or at least based off of some similar logic.
Yep.
And so my question on that, and that wasn't because I gave them a document and said, here's the way that I think. It was just, again, going back to that osmosis. And now the question that you just said is, how do you identify those people? Well, first of all, we have to get real with what are those behaviors, beliefs, and values that we feel like are the core of who we are, and then start to see who fits into that category and that alignment. Because if you don't have that starting point, then it's whoever is going to kiss your butt the most, really. So
Chad, I know immediately first thing popped into my mind, people that are listening, is when you identify these people, your biggest fear, what if they leave?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So how that's not yours, Tom?
Not at all. No. I mean, that's a very old school mentality of, I believe that other people have that thought. Don't get me wrong. I just think
So how do you address that? you spend a bunch of time, you identify somebody, and
your job to build a culture that keeps them to stay. Like, I don't think Chad has, I mean, he might have that fear, but like, if you build the right culture and you give the right rewards to the people, I mean, it's your job as the owner to create a culture that people want to stay. I mean, everyone's heard the adage of like, well, what if I train them and they leave? Well, what if I don't train them and they stay? Right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just
but the other side of that is what's the driving factor for somebody to leave?
Right. That's what I'm getting at. Don't give them a driving factor to leave.
Well, what would that be? Especially if you're looking for identifying leaders, it's because they don't feel they have a level of autonomy. They don't feel that they have a level of impact. They feel like they're just going to be under the shadow of the founder forever. Like those are typically some of those reasons why people would go, I'm out.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, everybody, I mean, my belief is if you're doing your job as the owner and creating opportunity for people to grow, then they're not going to have a reason to, like, you should be meeting with your employees, figuring out what they're looking for, and like do your part to give them that opportunity working for you. That's kind of the point. That's what drives me personally to grow our company, is to give that opportunity to other employees. And some might leave, and that's fine, but I'd rather have 3 super high performing people and 1 leave than avoid growing people at all.
Yeah. Well, I think the other side of that coin is, because I've had this conversation before, is as an owner, I don't want to tell somebody that this is what I want them to do, or this is the path that I think that they can take, because if it doesn't happen, then that's detrimental, because I have either dangled a carrot or given them a false sense of what could be, and then they're going to get, frustrated by that and want to leave too. So like so effectively what let me summarize that, because you guys are both blank staring at me. That you have to help develop a path and a plan for people to be able to grow into different elements. Also, if you do that and it doesn't pan out that way, are they going to be frustrated and quit either way? Right.
And I think it depends on what you're, it's your job as the owner to set the vision of the company. Some people's vision might be, I want to keep this company and not be growth oriented. And some people's vision might be, I want to grow, but it also has to be, why do you want to grow? And you're going to attract different types of people depending on your vision. And if you got to make sure you're communicating that to your team. But yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, just because we've talked about this before, and I think I disagree with both of you. Just on for a good period of time, there's that management philosophy where, you figure out how each person individually is motivated, and then figure out, it's either money, it's either ego, or it's flexibility. It's one of those 3 things, always. And, you find out what motivates them, and then reward them and compensate them based on that. And I subscribed to that for a while. And then what I realized was that causes absolute chaos, because you have a different set of rules for everyone. And it's very hard to scale. It's very hard to manage. You spend all your time running around in circles. So I just said, I'm done with it. As you guys know, one of our key leaders, what I felt was a key leader, one of our key guys, just took a job elsewhere a couple of weeks ago. And it was a friend. It was a guy I care about. It was a buddy. But I also realized that, just his wants weren't aligned with maybe myself. And I've just come to the point where I want people that are motivated by the same things that I am. And so we're aligned on that. So I don't have to spend all this time. We can work on the business rather than spending time, I almost want to say, placating to everyone.
Yeah, but in order to do that, you have to have a very clear vision and say, this is what we are about, and this is where we're headed. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And then,
whether you call that core values, whether you call that mission statement, whatever it is, you have to repeat it. You have to make it visible. And and a lot of people are going to hear that and say, "Oh, it's this crap again." Well, call it all this crap again, but you're going to spend all your time running in circles because of this. If you're very clear with your intentions, and I mean, write it on the walls, start the meetings with it, everything.
Yeah.
Get that in everyone's mind, because they will decide very quickly if they don't match this, they'll move elsewhere.
It's ironic. I was scrolling through Twitter last night, and Twitter is probably listening to our podcast or something, because it flashed up a post from someone that talked about, if you're growing from 50 to 500 employees, the only way you can do it is through vision and values, and making sure that you basically eat, sleep, and breathe your values, and call them whatever you want. Like, it literally said what you just said, Lars. It says, call them what you want, but make sure everything you're doing is tied to them. Your performance reviews, your quarterly check-ins, your goal setting, everything should be tied to them. And it's not like you shove them in somebody's face, but you make sure that they're prevalent, and you remind people, and you don't necessarily even talk about them, but you act with them. And I think that's something you hear. I mean, every time I ask Chad about something he's working on or doing, he always ties it back to one of his core values, probably actually just by habit of, like, because of our value of outrageous kindness, we do this. And it's like, it's ingrained in your speak almost.
So
yeah, go ahead, Lars.
I was just going to say, so, to tie this kind of back in, as far as, identifying, and I think what we're saying here is, we have to make sure that what we value is front and center and everyone knows, because that's people are going to remove themselves when they don't align, and we are. But, and I think we've, established that we've got, if you're playing the infinite game and wanting this company to be something more than you, and provide you with whatever you're trying to do, like the flexibility, which is what most people are looking for later in their careers. How the kind of the dilemma you're in is, how do you free yourself up to that next level? And then I think we've done a reasonably good job with that. But I think that next step is, how do we get, like, how does Chad, he used Sam. How does Chad instill with Sam that Sam now has to find his next? That's the next level. How do we do that?
Because it's Sam's responsibility to start to develop that, not Chad's responsibility. It's not Zach's responsibility.
Yeah, and then Sam pops up to where Chad is, right? And now Chad has to, or Sam has to develop some new skill sets, right? So how are you guys doing that right now? Or are you? Because I'm not. I've never really thought about it until, last week.
The only thing we've done, which is very poorly, is just basically giving people the opportunity. Like, start by giving them the opportunity, and then coaching them along the way, putting them into management and leadership position, giving them responsibility and coaching them through it. Like, I think that's something that I've struggled with a little bit, and had conversations with some people on our team about, is like, how do we, they need to be ready to do this. They need to be ready to do this. And our field operations manager telling me, well, they're not going to be ready. Just give them an opportunity and coach them along the way. So I do think that's part of it, is giving people opportunity. And if you have the right people, they'll seize that opportunity. And Chad's had conversations with me about that as well.
And have you got like a schedule, or do you just give somebody a title? Or, like, before that, like, okay, Tony, you're a manager. Okay, that's one way to do it. But, if you've been in the company and you identify somebody that's, all right, 3-6 months, you're like, hey, this person kind of has something. They kind of relate. You'll have that feeling like this person's kind of, I might be onto something.
Yeah.
Is that, how early, or when do you start doing it? Do you start sending them with a manager? Do you have them job shadow somebody else? Do you one-on-one mentorship them?
So when we start going through these processes, I have to think back, how did we get to this point? What were the factors that we intentionally or unintentionally did to get to this point? And so when I look at folks like Sam, when I look at Zach and Nathan, I go, well, at a point I identified with Zach that he would really be a good operations manager, because he had some counterbalancing to me. So he had a significant better.
Probably why I like him.
Yeah, he had a significant better set of management skills that weren't perfect when he first joined the team, because he was learning as well, and he had never been in that type of role before. But there were the elements that were there. So, and it was like, well, how do I give him the resources for him to be trained, or to exercise those muscles, so that we can, one, validate that they work, and then two, if they do, then how do we release him to be able to do that fully? Because it was a little bit of and I know Tony has experienced this recently with Graham, as he's learning to walk, you still are kind of holding on because you don't want him to fall. And so you don't quite know when he's getting ready to take his first steps because you're still holding on. And at a point you have to just let go, and he's going to fall, and he's going to get up and take a few steps. And he's going to fall, and he's going to be mad. He's going to be angry, and then he's going to get back up, and he's going to figure it out eventually. But that transition between, I don't have to let him fall and walk because I'm carrying him everywhere, to let me walk beside of him with my hand in his, to I got to let him fall really quick so that he can now be independent. In that transition period, and this has been so ingrained in my brain for the past probably 6 months, is you don't know when that's going to happen. Like with kids learning to walk, you don't know if they're going to start walking at 8 months or if they're going to start walking at 14 months. And there's no magic spot.
Right. There is no rule.
At a point, you're like, man, I wish they would walk. I wish they would walk. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they've been doing it. And we have this human nature that we continually operate with, is we don't know when the actions and the practices that we are working on will actually work and actually be functional. And when we do, then we just take it for granted and we just move on, but we don't know when that is going to happen. And so all of that coming back to, but what gets us to that point? What are those actions? What are those behaviors that we're looking for to get to that point? So I'll give you
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, that's a funny analogy, because like you said, when they start walking, it's like crazy. They just go like a madman. And I think that's relatable to someone managing something. Once they get it, it clicks, and it's like, whoop, see you later. I don't know if this.
And then how much more does it free you up, because now they can walk on their own, and you don't have to pick them up and carry them all the time.
I don't know if this is answering your question, but in regards to figuring out who can be that person, I think it's important with all of your employees to make sure you're having those conversations about figuring out what their vision is. What do you want to be doing 1 year from now? What do you want to be doing 5 years from now? Being able to identify those people that are motivated to grow into that leadership role. Because if the want's not there, right? If Graham didn't want to walk, he would not walk. He would sit there and crawl around all day. And there are certain employees that they don't want to be in that management role, and you don't want to be putting that effort into somebody who just doesn't want it. You want to find out. And we just had a conversation this morning about, we eventually want to grow geographically, and I was talking to Tyler and saying, we need to figure out who are those people that we could move and help us grow. And I said, make sure you're having those conversations and ask people, figure out who wants to potentially run another branch. And let's be thinking 2 to 3 years down the road, so we can start preparing for that, and not only preparing with one person, but having backups in place. And from a management structure, growing and figuring out who wants to grow their skills into becoming a leader, and then, starting to set people up to succeed in that way. But you don't know how to set them up if you don't know who to set up.
Yeah. So when I had this conversation with my business coach, Kurt, this is a suggestion that he gave me. So I'll share it with you guys, and then we can see if this could potentially work or not. He said, look at, take each person in a position of leadership currently, and say me, for instance, I need to identify the current set of hard and soft skills that I functionally occupy. The things that and then kind of give a scale, 1 to 3, probably a good scale.
Stupid scale.
A scale of 1 to whatever, of how like confident you are with it, or how weak you are in that skill. And then identify, if I were to shed some of these skills off or delegate those off to somebody else, then what would that look like? And then these are the areas that I can move up in. So these are the things I'm significantly confident in, I'm competent in, and I can move ahead with them. These are things that need to be managed or maintained by somebody that's stronger in this skill set. Well, then now if I'm doing that kind of at a tiered level, and then I, say Zach, okay, now list out your hard and soft skills and rate yourself on these competencies, and I can rate with you as well. Well, now I might identify with him. Well, he can take these 3 things from me but he may be at a level, let's just say a scale of 1 to 10, he may be at a level 4 right now, but with some training and some exposure, he may be able to strengthen that skill set to be able to take it over. And so then that all starts to create a development plan to say, and when I'm trying to not give an exact example because I don't know the different skills to be able to apply. This is the brainstorming side, but so he has that particular skill that he would need to work on. So maybe that's like, well, there's a online training course, or maybe that can be worked out in a peer group, or, you know, maybe some one-on-one mentorship. And now that skill becomes stronger. Now he can take that over. And then how does that happen continually tiered down? Because Zach's got to be doing that for his next replacement and that next replacement down the line. And that becomes more formulated.
Yeah. And, you know, you touched on something that I think is very valuable. And I go back to, you know, probably the biggest growth period, I dare say, for all three of us was, you know, during that COVID era when we talked about this at length in our last podcast, episode 34, about, you know, that getting that group of business owners together and just kind of talking through what was going on. And that was a specific topic. But, you know, it really opened our eyes and really, you know, probably matured us a lot as business owners working through this as a group. And I wonder if that isn't, because I'm a believer that most people, this is going to be hard to believe, but a good portion of people in our organization are sick of hearing my voice. And
I don't find that hard to believe.
I'm just going to pause.
Jeez.
Let everyone absorb that, because everyone will be in shock. They won't even hear this.
I might need to sit down here.
You know, there's a point where, you know, why do professional sports teams fire their coach? Right? Generally speaking, they need a new voice.
Oh,
right. Yeah. They need a new voice. Right. And just a new message, because eventually you just start tuning out the same things, right? You don't listen to the words, you just know what they're inferring and you kind of move on. But, you know, we tried that, I think, a couple of years ago, and it's probably something that we should be considering again, is identifying some of our leaders, putting them in groups outside of the situation. Because how much do we learn from each other? How much do we learn in these other industry events? You know, that's a hugely valuable tool that we're probably not using. So
correct.
Can we create something like that for, you know, my ops manager sits with yours, sits with Tony's, right? That kind of thing, because that's probably valuable on multiple levels.
Correct. And I 100% agree with that. I think that's one of the elements of the tools. And if you were to identify prior to that, these are the areas of skills that we need to strengthen, or areas that we're weak in, then those are the active things. So you say, hey, I'm trying to think of an example. So I don't know if either one of you can throw out a skill as an example, but say Zach. Let's just use Zach and say spreadsheets. He needs to get better.
Data analysis is probably the weakest thing in our industry.
Perfect. And I wouldn't even know where to scale him on that, but let's just say he's at a 3. And so on a scale of 1 to 10. And so when they come to this group, hey, I need to get better at data analysis. Okay. Who is doing that now, and how can we share? And then Matt comes in and says, well, I'm weak on, you know, whatever, team meeting organization. Okay, cool. And now they're sharing best practices to be able to strengthen those, but also it just gives you kind of this list of training that they need to go and get wherever.
This is your management development training. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
And then from that point, you now have a template to go back and say, well, here's Bob. And we think Bob has got some of these. Well, one, to Tony's point, let's have a conversation with Bob. Are you interested in moving into more leadership? Okay, if so, here's this assessment. Let's go through this assessment with you to see where you are strong and where you need some additional training. And then we start to deploy that. And now we've got this bench, this pipeline of people that are actively going through leadership development. So at a point, boom, you've got your next branch manager, you have your next team leads, et cetera.
So I got to ask you the question then. You know, we we have, each other, and we've over the years built a group that we go to. If we have any questions, we go to Glenn, and he gives us it occurs to me that, right? But for people that don't have that same network right now, because what we're talking about is being very intentional about this.
Yeah.
This is how did we do this? Well, literally went out, found it. Chad, I think, if I'm talking about the business meeting online, you literally sent an email to these 20 people and say, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. We're going to get there and we're going to have this conversation. And it just worked, right? Because there's good content. But if you don't have that network in the industry, what do you recommend? How do you get started? I know the MSC program is awesome for this. Yeah. They're setting up the peer groups. I've talked about the MSC program at length, but if you're not part of that, and you're not part of that organization, and you're just kind of getting started, how do you even get started with this?
Well, this is the only thing that I caution on that, because I agree with the methodology. I agree with some of those tactics. The challenge, retrospectively, that I look at is if you don't have a sense, and I think one of the reasons the business meeting.online worked the way that it did is because we had a little bit of a structure and agenda, and we said, this is what we're going to do. This is not not a gripe session. This is not let's complain about everything. This is not let's just beat our chest on how we're great at something, or tell you how it's everybody else's fault.
There was a topic and an agenda for each meeting.
Agenda,
absolutely,
and we stayed on topic. And I think a lot of times peer groups can really get off track to just be a complaint session.
Yeah.
And so my thought, and again, working with me on this, because this is all just brainstorming, is how do you get yourself to a point of awareness through some type of an assessment or understanding of these are the things that I need to work on. I think a lot of times when people walk into peer groups, they don't come in with a sense of humility that they need to work on something. They walk in thinking that they already have it all figured out. And that may be, it may be not the case with you guys, but I think that's a high majority of the case when people walk into those. There's not a sense of, oh, I actually do need to improve on something. Right. And then if they do, they may not actually know what they need to work on. So that's how do you get that precursor in? How do you get that assessment to say, this is where I'm at and this is where I need to go?
I don't know how you make yourself humble. If you're not humble already, can you develop that? I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think you just have to be not afraid of asking questions. If you want to grow, go to your manager and say, hey, I want to learn what it takes to be a manager. Who should I be talking to? If one of your employees came to you and said that, Chad, you'd know who to connect them to. They may not know by themselves, but don't be afraid to ask the question to somebody.
Agreed. But I'm thinking 10 years ago, if somebody asked me that, I'd be like, I don't know.
But that you weren't at that point.
It's going to take a long time. That would be an answer because I didn't know. And that's what that's where this whole brainstorming thing is coming back to is how do you put the plan in place? What's the plan for? Because we all three of us have leaders in our organization now that we brought in, we developed, we hired in, whatever, but they're there. And that's great. And there's going to be a ceiling at some point until you figure out how to create a pipeline for that next set to come in. And my question is, and the reason the brainstorm's happening is, I don't know if you guys have had a plan, but I'm trying to figure out what is the plan for us to develop that pipeline and get those people in without it being on our shoulders.
Without it being you driven.
Yes.
So that's what you're saying.
Well, sorry, can you clarify a little more? I'm going to ask the question that you kind of just answered, but what is the challenge you have? I'm struggling to understand the challenge.
Yes. Great question. 42 minutes in. Is going back to creating a pipeline of leaders so that as I want to scale to the next iteration of my career, Zach, Nathan, Sam, etc., scale to the next iteration of their career. How do we have an established methodology of assessing, identifying, and training the next leaders in our organization well before we need them? So
what is stopping you from doing that?
A formulated plan so that it can be consistent, because outside of that, then it's the copy methodology. So I did it a certain way through happenstance, through intentionality, whatever. And it may have worked for a small group of people, but now if you double that group of people, because all of those leaders have now got to start identifying 1 to 2 leaders that they can bring up, and then maybe that works. But then what about those guys?
I think you have to
They
think
don't have a
about
plan.
it from a higher. I mean, we talked a little bit about identifying future potential that is currently working for you, but I think you can also somewhat do that in the hiring process. Like you see larger companies have like apprentice programs and like leadership development positions, literally, where they're hiring you, they're doing a rotation to try to like fast track you to becoming a leader. Obviously, you need a certain set of skills and exposure to different areas of the business. But I think that it's something you could potentially do in your hiring process. Like we are looking to hire future leaders. And I think that attracts a different mindset than, if you post an ad saying I'm looking for a technician, you're going to get a different applicant than I'm looking for a future leader. And as part of that program, this is your path. This is what we're going to do.
Sure.
And you may not become a future leader, but
when you say that you're going to hire a leader, this is the thing. This is the challenge that I get struggled with. When you say you need to hire a leader or a manager, you will have a lot of people that will say, "That's me," because there is a direct
it's inferred that's more money, more prestige,
correct.
more
yeah,
everything.
but
Yes,
you're going to realize real soon if they have that potential or not.
Yeah, but again, I can. Maybe the person that's hiring can. What is the formulated plan that will keep that consistent for the next 4 or 5 iterations of leadership cycle, creating that pipeline? You think, go ahead.
So I've been listening to you babble here for a few minutes, and I think I've finally come to understand what you're getting at. And I'm going to reference, I think it's Traction again, Gino Wickman. The exercise, what we did, it's about, establishing core values. You basically close your eyes, picture 3 people you'd clone. And if you could clone them, your organization would be perfect, right? You take that, and then I remember doing this with my 2 partners. We sat in a boardroom that didn't have any heat. I remember that part specifically. Froze our butts off out in a mountain town for a day. A lot of fun. Point was, we did this exercise, and they wrote 2 names on the board. Their 3 were identical. My 3 were, one of them was different. And then we talked about why they were on the board. Why did we want to clone them? And talked about all the characteristics that they have. That is literally how we built our core values. It wasn't something, this is what we wanted. It's a literal take out of the book that is an exercise that tells you how to do that. But I think you can use that same exercise and evaluate kind of your team. So if you do that exercise, we put that on the board and say, okay, this is what we value from our existing team. And then we can take those and start thinking, okay, so who else exemplifies, maybe they don't have all of them, but who else exemplifies them? And that will help you start identifying, some of your internal people. That might be workable.
That makes sense. And I would want to clarify soft and hard skills. So hard skills
definitely
would be, I know how to install hardware. Soft skills would be, I know how to
show empathy.
Show empathy.
I would say that I think you can teach the hard skills a lot easier than the soft skills.
Absolutely. I think that is definitely agreed, because if you don't have the soft skills already, it's a significant harder bend to get there.
So to kind of recap a little bit what Lars says and what we've talked about so far. So we talked about at the beginning, setting the vision, right? Where do you want to go?
And why?
and why. So you can show people, here's where we're going, here's why we're going there. That's going to start attracting the right group of people. Then you define your values, right? Lars, you mentioned that. Defining the values, figuring out what are the things we care about. Again, that's going to help weed out the good and the bad, or not the good and the bad, but the people that are going to work well with you. I remember the MSC conference a couple of years ago that resonates with me. The guy talked about planting your flag, right? You're not going to be everybody to everybody, everything to everybody, but figure out what's important to you. And I remember, you kind of referenced this already, Lars, but I remember thinking during that presentation how that is something Chad has done an amazing job of, right? He leans into the fact that he loves coffee, he loves beards, whatever.
And the color green.
Yes. And he leans into that. And he's unapologetic about it. He doesn't
That's for sure.
If you don't like coffee, you can still work at Loc-Doc. That is fine. But it is something you don't shy away from, right? You know who you are and you lean into that. You can tell that. And then I think the third thing is, you find out who are the people in your organization that could potentially fill those roles. You start having conversations with them. You give them the opportunities to grow. And then you start looking for people externally. What is that missing, Chad? What is missing from that? What is still perplexing you?
I think the final thing is the development of an assessment to validate all of those things, because you've already set a clear vision. You know where you're looking for. You know what the values are. Now I've got to identify the people, but now I need to ensure that those people are going to kind of are going to be on the path. And then it also allows those folks to say, well, if I want to move up, if I want to be applicable for this position, these are the things that I need to work on, or I need to get training on to get to that point.
Yeah. And then I think it's also making sure that you're giving them that opportunity. I know personally for me, I can go sit in a class all day long. If I don't go apply what I learned, I'm done. I just lose it. So I think even if it's something small, like, hey, we want you to lead this project, or, hey, we want you to, we're doing this initiative. Can you lead this? And giving them little things to kind of test.
So test the skill versus
test your assessment, right? Hey, I think
instead of giving them the opportunity, test the skills.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know we got to land the plane here pretty quick, but I'm going to bring up, you two have your favorite word of the month from your calendar, cadence.
Cadence,
right? Cadence, yes. Cadence. Ugh, but the thing I'm just thinking, what are the challenges? What are going to wreck this plan?
Inconsistency.
Exactly. So I'm already thinking in my mind, it's like, okay, how do I prioritize this? Who do I have to, because I'll do this for a week and then who's next. Right. But that's, I probably have to establish, probably going to talk to Matt, going to establish, is this important? Do we value this? Who are we going to identify? We should probably have our senior managers sit around a table and let's go through this exercise of the core value. Let's identify some people that, get at want it capacity, align with these values and skills that we need and we admire, and then establish a cadence. Because what will waste your time, speaking from experience, is if we do this once and that's it. Because I look at professional development, if I actually, we're so wrapped up in our business. For us, it's like, oh, well, we just did that. And then you look at it, that was a year and a half ago. Like, we spent one day on this a year and a half ago. And for some people, like, a year and a half, that's, 10% of their life, like it, year and a half, 10%. I guess that doesn't matter. It's
okay.
But for somebody that's only been around for 3 months, right? Like, it's just the idea of time is just so different. So
correct. Yeah. If you're in a 15-year career and somebody's been with your company for 2 years ago,
I remember that versus
that makes sense.
Right. So just creating that cadence, however you have to do it, throw it in your calendar, but finding someone that's going to make this sticky. Yeah. Right? We talk about sticky, portable, et cetera, et cetera. Because I know if I try and implement this, that will be my number one downfall is I got to make sure this is sticky and consistent.
Yeah.
So
I like it. Tony, your terrific topic.
Yeah.
Terrible topic.
Before we get to that, I wanted to try something different. What is your main takeaway of the day? One thing you're going to do differently based on this conversation, Chad?
So my next big thing is, I think, kicking around the idea. I need to validate an assessment with our key leadership, and agree with everything Lars just said. I'm not going to be the one that's going to drive it. I'm going to put it out there that it's important, but I'm not going to be the guy that manages it, and get the assessments in place so that we can start having those tiered conversations.
How about you, Lars?
Validate's a good word. I want to talk to our key people and say, I got to make sure I'm on base here. Or does this matter to everyone? I've got to explain the why and push that why of why I believe this is critical for our organization. Assuming I can get that, we then can establish a cadence of how we're going to do this and implement this, because I need them all on board. Because if not, this will be out the window by next week when I've moved on.
Yeah, that was my takeaway too. I want to sit down with some key people and literally create a plan, like you said, Chad, of what are we going to do differently to make this happen, and what are we going to do and by when? Because it's a very long-term thing. You don't just do it and be done in a quarter. It's like, where do we want to be? And it goes back to knowing your vision, right? We all know we want our organization to grow, but it's communicating that and creating that plan and being, talking about it to our team. This is something we need. Who's willing to help?
Yeah, I think the underlining point there, maybe additional takeaway, is this isn't just a one-time thing. Right. This isn't an event. This is a new trend. It's some new behaviors that we want to put in as a habit, because this is going to form us for the next 10 years. It's not just a thing that we got to fix right now.
Because 10 years happens pretty quick.
Yeah.
You don't even realize that, but it does.
Tony, what's the terrific topic?
I'm at a conundrum here. My topic was going to be
indecisive Tony.
The value of vision and my topic was going to be the value of vision and values, and we kind of just spent 20 minutes talking about that, so we're not going to go that route. So I'm trying to improvise. I'm going to go with.
Oh boy!
I'm going to take a suggestion from one of our listeners, Kevin from IDN. At what point do you walk away from a bid? I'm going to twist that just a little bit. I want to talk about that, but. At what point do you say no? Knowing how to say no to things. I think it is really, a lot of people are yes. I want to talk about it in relation to a bid, but I think we can talk about it in relation to a lot of things. So knowing how to say no.
One thing.
Yeah.
This is great. I love this topic. Great suggestion, Kevin.
Approval. Oh.
Yes, Kevin. Good. I thought you were going to give Tony. That's better. I thought you were great topic, Tony. Whoa. Great topic, Kevin.
Yes. You got to know how to listen to people. So,
all right, I'm excited about it. Tony, if you'll remind me when we have that conversation to talk about the kiwi vine.
We already talked about the kiwi
Shout
vine.
out.
We didn't do it on the. Did we do it on the?
We already
episode
did it last
34.
episode.
Oh
yes,
episode 34, and Tony said this is a terrible story.
Ago, you talked about
he said this was terrible, and then you brought it back, and he's like, "Hey, that actually made sense."
Yeah, right? It's applicable to the no conversation.
You'll laugh. Actually, I used that analogy, the kiwi vine, to somebody yesterday.
Did you use the word cadence in conjunction with it? Because that would be amazing.
No. Chad, post a picture of your kiwi vine on the social so people can check this out.